Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. October 2nd, 1891, Allendale, South Carolina. It's late, really quiet, a typical sleepy southern town back then.
Mm-hmm. You almost feel that stillness.
Exactly. And then you hear it, the rumble of Southern Railway engine number 209 coming through the night. It's a lifeline, really.
Mm.
But this train, it's carrying something big.
A $50,000 payroll, which, I mean, you have to remember, back then, that was an incredible amount of money. Over, what, $1.5 million today? Maybe more.
Just staggering. It wasn't just cash. It was, people's wages, the potential for the area. But that calm night, it wasn't going to last.
No, it certainly wasn't. It's a powerful contrast, isn't it? This symbol of progress, the train, moving through a South still grappling with the aftermath of the Civil War, carrying this vulnerable, valuable cargo.
And then it happens. Suddenly, this massive explosion just rips through the darkness. Engine 209, the crew, the payroll, it's thrown violently off the tracks.
A horrific derailment.
And out of that chaos, two figures appear. Masked robbers. They head straight for the payroll, grab it, and just vanish into the nearby swamp.
Leaving behind devastation. Tragically, the engineer, James McBride, was killed in the crash.
And that's the core of it, the Allendale train heist. It happened 134 years ago, and incredibly, it's still unsolved.
It's that lack of resolution that really grabs you, doesn't it? It wasn't just theft. It was deadly, it was brazen, and the culprits just disappeared.
Yeah.
We're left asking who, how, and maybe most importantly, why.
Exactly. And that's what we're tackling today. We've both looked at the material, the reports, the history surrounding this, and we're going to try and unpack it together.
Sort of piece together what we know.
Right. Our mission here is to really get into the key events, look hard at the questions that still linger, and understand why this specific crime, this heist, still fascinates people after all this time.
To really get it, I think we need to remember what the U.S. was like in 1891. The Civil War wasn't that far in the past, maybe 25, 30 years. The nation, especially the South, was still dealing with the fallout, economically, socially.
Things were tough.
Yeah, and the Southern Railway, it wasn't just tracks and trains. For towns like Allendale, it was a vital connection. Commerce, communication, everything relied on it.
A real lifeline. And on Engine 209 that night, just ordinary men doing their jobs. James T. McBride, the engineer, he was in his late 40s, had a family back in Charleston.
Just trying to make a living.
Then there was the fireman. John Doe history hasn't even kept his full name consistently, and two brakemen, also unnamed in most accounts. They had no idea what was coming.
It really brings it home, doesn't it? Behind the headlines and the mystery, these were real people whose lives were shattered. McBride's death makes it clear this wasn't just about money. A life was taken.
And as they got close to Allendale, just after midnight, the trap was set. Those two masked figures were waiting. This wasn't random.
No, definitely not. The planning seems quite meticulous.
They placed logs on the tracks and stolen dynamite. Chillingly precise. You try to imagine those last few seconds for the crew. The normal rhythm, then just bam! That deafening blast.
Using dynamite like that, it suggests they weren't just trying to stop the train. They wanted a catastrophic derailment.
Yeah.
Maximum chaos, maximum opportunity for them, presumably to disable the crew. It points to a certain ruthlessness.
And it worked. The explosion tore the engine apart, sent it crashing down the embankment into the swampy ground. McBride was killed instantly.
Awful. And the others?
Injured, stunned, disoriented in the dark and the wreckage. And right then, the robbers appear at the express car. They knew exactly where to go.
Straight for the target. No hesitation. They must have overpowered the express messenger, Henry Clark, pretty quickly to get to that payroll chest.
It sounds like it. Then there were gunshots. We don't know the exact details. Maybe a struggle, maybe warning shots. But the brakemen, who'd managed to take cover, saw the robbers get away.
How did they escape?
On horseback. They rode straight into the swamp and disappeared into the night.
Ah, the swamp. That's a key detail, isn't it? It's not just a backdrop. It's almost like another character in the story, a natural escape route.
Absolutely. It offered immediate cover, and it's incredibly difficult terrain to pursue someone through, especially in the dark. You'd have to know it well or be incredibly bold, maybe desperate.
Or both. It immediately raises the question, locals or outsiders?
Exactly. Think about the aftermath. The explosion fades, local farmers start showing up with lanterns drawn by the noise. They find this scene of complete chaos. Word spreads like wildfire through Allendale.
A terrifying night for that small community.
But by morning, the reality sinks in. The robbers are gone, vanished into that huge low-country swamp. Were they, locals, using their knowledge of hidden paths? Or skilled outsiders who saw the swamp as the perfect getaway? That must have been the big question.
It shapes the whole investigation from the start. Local knowledge gives you an edge in that terrain, but outsiders might see it as an impenetrable shield against pursuit. Either way, it worked.
It really did. Because even the famous Pinkerton Detective Agency couldn't track them down. They were called in pretty quickly. This was a major crime.
William Pinkerton himself, wasn't it? The head of the agency took a personal interest.
That's right. Shows how seriously they took it. The Pinkertons went over the scene with a fine-tooth comb. They found clues, hoof prints going into the swamp, a discarded mask caught on a branch, bits of dynamite, tangible stuff.
But not enough.
Not enough. The trail just ended, right at the Savannah River. And that $50,000, gone. The weight of that missing money, the sheer audacity of the crime, it must have hung heavy over everyone.
The fact that the Pinkertons, with their reputation and resources, couldn't solve it says a lot about how well-planned this escape was, or perhaps how lucky the robbers were, or maybe how well they knew the area. It suggests a level of sophistication beyond just brute force.
It really does, because this wasn't impulsive. The derailment's precision, the timing, choosing that spot near the swamp, it all screams careful planning. Someone knew what they were doing.
Which leads us straight into the investigation and the theories that started swirling almost immediately.
Yeah, let's look at that. Sunrise the next day. Picture the scene. The wrecked train, McBride's body being recovered, Pinkerton agents arriving with bloodhounds, local deputies milling about. Grim work.
They interviewed the surviving crew, right? Fireman John Doe, the brakeman.
They did. Doe remembered the explosion vividly, but descriptions of the masked men were hazy, confused. Understandable, given the trauma and darkness. Even a big reward, $5,000, which was a fortune, then didn't bring in any solid leads.
Frustrating for the investigators. So who did they suspect initially?
Well, a few names and ideas popped up early on. There was a guy named Tom Black. Apparently he was a drifter, seen hanging around the area near the tracks before the heist, and then he conveniently disappeared right after.
Suspicious timing.
Very. Then there was the Dixie Gang. They were a notorious outfit based in Georgia, known for train robberies, bank jobs, and, crucially, using explosives. They seemed like prime suspects.
Their reputation definitely fit the crime profile, and Georgia isn't that far.
And of course, the theory that never really goes away in cases like this. An inside job. Someone working for the railroad who knew the schedule, knew about the payroll shipment, maybe even knew the best spot to stage the ambush.
All plausible starting points for an investigation? Black's presence and disappearance are suggestive, certainly. The Dixie Gang fits the MO. And the inside job, well, that kind of specific knowledge often points that way.
But here's the thing. None of those early leads went anywhere solid. The Pinkertons investigated Black. They looked into the Dixie Gang. They likely probed the possibility of an inside man, but they couldn't find concrete evidence. No proof.
Just dead ends.
Dead ends. And that Savannah River crossing, it remained a major obstacle. Did they cross into Georgia? Did that help them disappear? It complicated everything.
Crossing state lines would definitely hamper pursuit back then, make it harder to coordinate law enforcement efforts. It adds another layer of potential planning to their escape.
So the official investigation stalls out. The money's gone, the robbers are gone, the clues run dry. And what happens when there's a vacuum like that?
Local legends start to fill the void.
Exactly. Stories started cropping up in Allendale and the surrounding area. Tales of ghosts in the swamp, maybe the robbers themselves, guarding their ill-gotten gains. Whispers of buried treasure hidden deep in the muck, marked by some secret sign.
It's fascinating how folklore takes over, isn't it? It provides a narrative, maybe some kind of psychological closure, even if it's speculative. The idea of buried treasure, especially, is so captivating.
It really is. It keeps the mystery alive in a different way. If you lived there back then, hearing those stories year after year, it would definitely shape how you thought about the heist. Makes you wonder, if that treasure is out there, where would you even start looking?
An impossible question, really. But it feeds the imagination. So let's dig into those main theories that have persisted over the years. Tom Black, the drifter.
Right. Suspicious circumstances, being near the scene, disappearing. But like we said, no hard evidence ever surfaced to actually link him to the planning or the act itself. Seems like he remains just a suspicious figure, a maybe.
A classic person of interest who couldn't be definitively connected.
Yeah.
Happens a lot in cold cases. What of the Dixie Gang?
Their reputation was fearsome. Known for explosives, daring heists, operating relatively nearby. On paper, they look like strong candidates.
Right.
But again, zero proof connecting them specifically to the Allendale job. No recovered loot traced back to them, no confessions from captured members later on, nothing placing them definitively at the scene that night. It almost feels like they were too obvious a suspect, maybe.
That's possible. Sometimes notoriety can draw suspicion away from less obvious culprits.
Hmm?
Without that concrete link, they remain just another theory.
Which brings us back to the inside job idea. It feels compelling, doesn't it? Knowing the exact train, the payroll amount, the schedule, choosing that specific location, it suggests insider knowledge.
It does have a logical appeal. Precision often points to inside information in crimes like this. But again, the challenge is proving it. Who was it? How did they pass the information? No railroad employee was ever charged. No evidence emerged.
It's plausible, maybe even probable in some people's minds, but ultimately unproven.
Right. It's also possible they got the information some other way, careful observation over time, maybe an informant who wasn't directly employed by the railroad. We just don't know.
And then there's the legend that refuses to die. The buried treasure. That $50,000 worth millions today, hidden somewhere out there in the Allendale swamp. People have searched for it for generations.
It's the romantic angle, isn't it? The lost fortune waiting to be found. But despite all the stories, all the searching, not a single dollar of that payroll has ever verifiably turned up.
It's incredible that missing money is just this huge gaping hole at the center of the story. What do you think happened to it, based on everything?
Well, given that no one suddenly appeared with unexplained wealth and none of it was ever recovered or traced,
Yeah.
the most logical possibilities are either it was hidden extremely well, maybe intended for later retrieval that never happened, or it was simply lost. Lost in the swamp during the escape, maybe destroyed, maybe sunk somewhere irrecoverable. That environment is incredibly unforgiving. Hiding something securely yet accessibly in a swamp is harder than it sounds.
That makes sense. It wasn't just about the money, though. This heist left deep scars. Think about James McBride's family. His widow left to raise their children alone, dealing with that sudden, violent loss.
A devastating personal tragedy at the heart of the crime story.
And for Allendale itself, it created fear, shook people's sense of safety. Trust in the railroad, that vital link, was probably damaged too. Security was likely tightened up afterwards.
Absolutely. An event like that ripples through a community for a long time. Interestingly, though, while it was a huge deal locally and regionally, the Allendale heist hasn't quite achieved the same level of national fame as, say, Butch Cassidy or Jesse James.
Maybe because the robbers were never identified. They remained phantoms.
That could be part of it. The lack of known personalities makes it harder to mythologize in the same way. But locally, the story definitely endured.
Oh, for sure. It became part of Allendale's history, its identity almost. The swamp became synonymous with mystery, a place holding this dark secret, and the story kept being told.
And now here we are in 2025. It's the 134th anniversary, and there seems to be a fresh wave of interest. Historians, amateur sleuths online, people are digging into it again.
What do you think is driving that renewed interest now?
Anniversaries often spark reflection. Plus, the core elements remain compelling. The unsolved murder, the missing fortune, and maybe, just maybe, the hope that new information or technology could finally crack the case.
Incredibly, there have been some recent murmurs, haven't there? Even after all this time.
Yes, apparently some Pinkerton files surfaced or were re-examined just last year. They supposedly hint at a suspect who hadn't really been focused on before.
Who was that?
A former railroad worker named James Carter. The story goes he might have fled to Florida shortly after the heist. Now, the reports emphasize the evidence is thin, circumstantial.
But still, a new name, a potential new lead after 134 years. That's something.
It is. It shows why keeping historical records is so important. Even small details might gain significance later. It definitely warrants a closer look, even if it turns out to be another dead end.
And wasn't there something else found recently near the derailment site?
Right, in 2024, some rusted tools were discovered. Nothing definitive, no treasure chest, obviously, but it led to speculation. Could have been a temporary hideout, a place they stashed supplies before or after the robbery.
Intriguing. Even small physical clues like that can potentially tell us something about their movements, their methods.
Exactly, and then you have the ongoing local stories. Strange lights seen in the swamp at night.
Ah, yes, the ghost stories
Versus modern-day treasure hunters with flashlights, most likely. But it shows the legend is still alive, still part of the local conversation.
So, with all this, plus modern technology, what are the chances now? Could things like ground-penetrating radar find something? DNA, if any relevant samples ever turned up?
The potential is there, absolutely.
Yeah.
GPR could possibly locate buried objects, metallic items, maybe disturbed ground. DNA is trickier after so long, especially in a wet environment like a swamp. But you never say never if, say, the mask or other items held biological traces that were somehow preserved.
The swamp itself is the biggest challenge, I imagine. The terrain, the water, the decay over time.
It's a huge obstacle. But it's encouraging that organizations like the South Carolina Historical Society are apparently pushing for renewed attention, maybe even a fresh look using modern methods, and the online communities keep discussing it, sharing theories.
Just make you wonder, could this be the year? Could 2025 finally bring a breakthrough? If you could have one question answered about this case, what would it be?
That's tough. I think ultimately identifying the robbers would be the most significant breakthrough. Knowing who they were could potentially lead to understanding their motives, what happened to the money, and maybe finally bring some sense of justice for James McBride. That, for me, would be the hope. Resolving the who is often key to the why and what happened next.
Yeah, I agree. Knowing who did it feels like the biggest missing piece. So, wrapping up our deep dive today, we're left with this powerful story. A life tragically cut short, a fortune that vanished into thin air, and a mystery that has endured for, well, nearly a century and a half.
It really is a compelling case. It touches on history, crime, human nature, the persistence of memory, and the lure of the unsolved.
And we want to reiterate, if anyone listening has any information, maybe a family story passed down, anything at all related to the Allendale train heist, please consider reaching out to the South Carolina Historical Society. They are genuinely interested in hearing about it.
Absolutely. You never know what seemingly small detail might be the key. Even after all this time, every bit of potential information is valuable.
We really appreciate you joining us for this exploration of the Allendale mystery. Your interest helps keep the search for answers alive. If you have thoughts on the case, share them using the hashtag Allendale Heist. We'd love to see what you think.
Yes, continuing the conversation is important. These stories matter.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. It's a reminder of the enduring power of unsolved mysteries, isn't it? And the importance of keep asking questions. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.